Good morning, children. Children, in the last session we have finished up the polar regions. I hope you have finished up the fair notes of the polar region. Please submit the work which you have done. And now we move on to the history topic, landlords and tenants under British and the Nizam. Before I begin with this unit, I would like to tell you the meanings of these landlords and tenants. Landlord means the person who owns a large piece of land along with the labours is called as a landlord. Tenant means somebody who takes land as a rent, okay? He pays the rent and he cultivates the land is called as a tenant. And how these landlords and tenants worked or performed their functions during the British and under the Nizams, let us see in this unit today. So there were Jamindars who used to take up the collection of the land revenue and which was submitted to the king, and the peasants used to pay the rent regularly for the crops which they have cultivated. In today's lesson, let us see right from the Mughal period how these Jamindars used to collect the taxes, and the Mughal emperors, how powers were divided among the administrators in order to collect this revenue, and how these people had finally dispensed the justice at the village level. Also we will see under this unit the landlords and tenants under the Britishers and under the Nizams. So in order to understand under the British, first we need to go with the Mughals. During the Mughal period, what was the land revenue system, land system and land tenure system, and then how it was preceded by the Britishers, we will understand. It was during the time of the Mughal emperors, the Jamindars used to collect the land revenue from the peasants, and on their behalf, it was on their behalf that the emperor, in return, from the emperor point of view, the Jamindars used to collect on their behalf from the peasants. So in return, they received a small share of the revenue collected by these Jamindars from the taxes, and sometimes they also had the right to collect small taxes. For example, if 100 rupees is collected as a tax, out of this 100 rupees, out of these 10 rupees, they used to keep it with them, and 90 rupees they used to give it to the king. And sometimes they used to collect small taxes also. They even have the right to collect the taxes. Why they had the right to collect? Because they used to have, they also had a small band of soldiers whom they have to maintain with horses and guns, and their houses were very big, like small forts, and in Telangana region they are called as Gadi. A small fort of Jamindar where the band of soldiers, horses, guns used to be there. It's called as a Gadi. And this enabled them to control the nearby villages, even not only a single village but the nearby villages also they had a control over it. And as revenue collectors, the Jamindars often acted as intermediaries between, the intermediary means mediator, between the government and the peasants. So they often represented the problems faced by the peasants in front of the government, and at the same time they also tried to enforce the regulations imposed on the peasants by the government. As they are the mediators, if the government said any regulations to enforce, they used to enforce them. If the peasants have any problem, they used to be brought to the notice of the government through the Jamindars. So they used to act as a mediators between the peasants and the government. The Jamindars also owned their own land which was cultivated with the help of the laborers or workers. So this was called as a self-cultivable land, or this is also called as a Kutkasht. Kutkasht means is nothing but a self-cultivable land. So this also gave their land to peasants. They also gave this land to the peasants to cultivate in exchange of either a share or the rent. So a share of the produce or a fixed rent. We call such landowners as landlords. The peasants who gave their land for a fixed rent or for the share of a crop are called as landlords. So peasants who cultivate their lands are called as tenant cultivators, because they have to pay a fixed rent, or otherwise they have to give a share of their crop, so they are called as tenants. So at the beginning of the lesson only we have learnt about the meanings of the tenants and the landlords. And thus, the Jamindars had two important roles to play. The first one is collection of the land revenue from the peasants and owning land as landlords. So there were two kinds of peasants again. Those who were independent land-owning cultivators paying land revenue through the Jamindar, though those who were tenants of the landlords. So these are the two kinds of peasants. So the Jamindar and those who were tenants of the landlords, Indian towns and villages had a large number of highly skilled artisans also, such as weavers were there, dyers, masons, and metal smiths, whether it is a blacksmith or goldsmith, carpenters. They were engaged in craft production and services to support the agricultural activity. In addition, there were also workers providing personal and community services like barbers, butchers, and shepherds, cattle herders, basket makers, washer folk. These all are the people who provide the services to these above said professionals. And these artisans and service providers often belong to the backward classes or to the low castes. As a result, some of them had small plots of land, but mainly got their livelihood from providing the services to the farmers and to the landlords. This is how they used to attain their livelihood, by selling the services. If a carpenter is there, his activity is very important for the agricultural tools and implements in order to repair them. So he even owns a small plot of land, but mostly the main livelihood is only through the working as a carpenter. If you look at the permanent settlement system which has been introduced by the Britishers, when the British gained control over India, they were keen to increase the land revenue and as much as possible to finance all their trade and wars within the country. So this led to the ruining of agriculture. Ruining in the sense destruction of agriculture it has led to, as farmers could not cultivate land under such a huge high conditions. You might have seen the film like Lagan, where there was a drought condition, there was no cultivation possible, but still they have to pay the tax. So in such conditions they have completely destructed the agriculture. The British realized that they needed to have a system of land revenue which would also encourage the agriculture. So they were also keen that peasants should till more and more land and grow crops that were in demand in the market, especially the cash crops, because they can sell these crops in the European countries like cotton, indigo, sugarcane, wheat. So East India Company officials began to feel that investment in land had to be encouraged and agriculture had to be improved. But how this should be done? After 2 decades of debate on the question, the company has finally introduced a system called as permanent settlement system in 1793. So the system through which the British started collecting the tax was permanent settlement system. This was introduced in the year 1793. And who introduced this one? Lord Cornwallis has introduced this system. So it was the Governor General Cornwallis who introduced this system, and according to the terms of the settlement, the Jamindars were given the power to collect the revenues agreed upon the auction. So there will be auction. Auctioning, I think you know auctioning. Generally, if there is a product, somebody says 100 and other says 120. Okay, and the other says 200. The auctioning will be going on. IPL auctioning, you have seen how will they purchase the players. In the same way, so the Jamindars and the peasants, there will be auctioning system will be there, through which therefore it was also called the Jamindari settlement, because the Jamindar will settle a fixed amount on that land. They have to pass on 90% of the amount to the government and retaining 10% as the collection charges. 90% they have to pay it to the government and 10% they have to retain as a collection charges. So the amount to be paid was fixed permanently. This will neither increase nor decrease. You may increase the production, but you need not pay anything higher. You have to pay only the fixed amount. Even if you decrease your production, but you have to pay the fixed amount. So that is it was not be increased in the future. So it was felt that this would ensure a regular flow of revenue into the company, and at the same time encourage the Jamindars to invest in the agricultural activities. But the Jamindars, however, collected more and more revenue than agreed upon through auctioning. They continuously increased the land tax revenue and changed the cultivators who did not meet the demand. and this settlement inadvertently converted all the peasants into tenants. Even small landowners also they have turned into the tenant, and they were dependent upon the Jamindar now. And the Jamindars collected rent rather than the revenue from them, since rent collected was much higher than the revenue collected. So the revenue which has to be deposited with the government, they used to collect little, but whereas the rent which they keep with themselves was collected very largely. The cultivators could not pay the entire amount, and sometimes they deserted the lands also. In the long run, the Jamindars also suffered and became defaulters. And what was the result of this Jamindari system or the permanent settlement system? We shall see in the next class, children. Thank you.